Do you want to?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
Mhm. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the first leg of our series of webinars on sharing strategies and experience in campaigning to end corporal punishment. So today our webinar will be on effective campaigns to end corporal punishment. This event is hosted by End Corporal Punishment, so myself, Sonia Vojito, and my colleague Beth Herbert. And the co-host is the Council of the Baltic Sea State, CBSS. And then we will have today Olivia Lind Haldorson, who will be also hosting and facilitating this session at a later stage. So today we'll hear about campaigning strategies and experiences from all over the world. We'll have Sri Lanka, Australia, Jamaica, Canada. We'll make time for a question and discussion. It will be an interactive session today. We welcome all questions from the chat and so on. We'll be happy to answer. We'll do our best. And then the second part of this session today will be hosted by our colleague from CBSS, our partners. And then we'll talk about Iceland and Kenya. So the idea actually is to have this peer-to-peer learning from a different perspective, whether talking with the politicians, it could be the use of evidence and data and so on. So that will be very interesting, hopefully. And then also share effective strategies, as we said. So welcome again, and we look forward to a fruitful session with all of you. Thank you. Bess, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to see you. If you want to, please do introduce yourself in the chat. I'm just still letting in a few people. And yeah, we hope this is an informal session where there's time for you to make comments, ask questions, etc. I am just going to share our slides. Now we're getting there. Okay, so yeah, we thought it was really important to think a little bit about campaigning to end corporal punishment. This is a very important activity in achieving change for children. And when a law is passed or when the government makes policy and legislative changes, it can be forgotten that often lots of people have worked for a long time towards that goal, and that campaigning is such an important part of making change for children. And in many countries, there have been very long, well-organized campaigns that precede the introduction of new laws and policies. And local and national campaigners can take a huge amount of credit for the change that is seen in many countries. And it might be behind the scenes, or it might be in ways that are not fully recognized, but campaigners at all levels make a really big difference. And as we'll hear later, campaigns also continue after law reform has been achieved. So the importance of campaigning doesn't just stop just because a law prohibiting corporal punishment, for example, has been passed. And not only do campaigns aim to change the law, but they achieve many other things in the process. So they often really build knowledge and understanding among the public and among particular groups and sectors. They share helpful and accurate information, for example, about children's rights, child development, positive discipline strategies. They allow discussion to take place. They support norms and behaviour change and support change in public opinion. They allow alliances and partnerships to be built. So it's not just the one goal of achieving law or policy reform, but a whole kind of change in norms and beliefs and behaviour across society is often achieved through campaigning. I think a really important point is that effective campaigns are very context specific, and they include an assessment of what are the particular issues, opportunities, and challenges in every context. And that's a really important part when you're developing your own campaign. It's thinking about, in our country, in my community, what are the issues that we face? Who are the communities we need to access? What are the really important messages? What are the obstacles? So context is really important. But just before, and hopefully each of the speakers today will talk about their campaigns in their context, and there's so much to learn about that. But just before that, Sonia and I will talk briefly about some of the broad strategic and strategies and factors that can impact across many different contexts that we've kind of seen across the world. So, sorry, still letting people in. Right, let me see if I can change my slides. Okay, so here are some of the strategies that are useful across contexts. So, and we won't go into a lot of detail now, we're just going to briefly list some of them. So the power of effective alliances and coalitions, showing that there's a broad base of support for a particular law reform. Building multi-sectoral support, so across kind of different professional backgrounds, for example, across early education and children's rights and health. All of that is very important to make the case that this is a campaign that has broad support. Thinking about parliamentary campaigning is really important, and it's very specific to the parliament that you're dealing with. I think Kate is going to talk a bit about the parliamentary campaign in Canada. Thinking about effectively engaging with the media can be really important. So sometimes talking about corporal punishment can be quite a contentious issue, and you need to think very carefully about what works within your media context. Building support among community and faith leaders can be really important, particularly if you see that opposition could come from any of those areas, or the arguments might be focused around maybe community or faith or cultural issues. Overcoming opposition generally is really important to think about. Where do you expect it to come from? How would you tackle it? Using legal action and human rights mechanisms has been really important in lots of countries for kind of really prodding the government to take action. And then, as we'll hear later, campaigning for better implementation of the law once prohibition has been achieved remains a really important issue and campaign in many countries. Resourcing campaigns is very rarely talked about, but really important. Resources are very scarce in lots of places, and it would be great to hear anything anyone has to say about how they've approached that. And the role of data and evidence is also really important in helping to really make a very strong case for why corporal punishment needs to be addressed, how it can be addressed, the benefits of addressing it. Okay. And then I think Sonia is going to talk a little bit about some of these factors that can contribute or lead to law reform.
Yeah, very briefly, actually, the conducive factors that can lead to law reform, achieving prohibition in all or a particular setting. For example, we need definitely the political leadership. We need to have the government, legislators on our side. It can also be just school authorities. It can take school authorities to decide that corporal punishment has to be banned in schools and then trigger the process. So that's very important because they are the decision makers, policy makers. We need a persistent long-term campaigning, and that's for sure. We will hear from you. In some cases, we've seen that prohibition has been achieved after 10 years of campaign, and that only in one setting. So this is very important. It's really a long haul. It can be a long haul. And then also the domino effect. So we can see that sometimes in a particular region, if corporal punishment is prohibited in one country, neighboring countries will want also to achieve prohibition because they don't want to be seen as lagging behind. And that can be countries, but it could be states as well, where, for example, if I'm based in New York and then you have prohibition in school in New York, and then there will be a neighboring state willing to do the same. And also, we can have a shift in public opinion. It can be that public opinion decide that this is enough. We have to end corporal punishment. We have to prohibit it, and that can push authorities. So if we don't have the political leadership, the public opinion can push actually decision makers to make a change. So that's important as well. And there can be also growing consensus across expert opinion, and that's usually supported by data. When prevalence, we can see a high prevalence of corporal punishment in schools or any other settings, that can be also a trigger to achieve prohibition of corporal punishment. And human rights recommendation as well. When we work with a committee on the rights of the child, or the Universal Periodic Review, or the African Committee of Experts, when they make recommendation, we can use it as well as an advocacy tool, and that's a sort of commitment for states to make a change. And legal action, strategic litigation, when we take the states to court, then when we take legal action, that could be also a trigger. They will want to address the issue. So there are different ways of making sure that we can achieve prohibition. And then sometimes it has happened, sadly, that cases of severe corporal punishment, a child would die from a corporal punishment, that also will trigger a shift in public opinion and lead authorities to take measures to end corporal punishment and prohibit it. So, and obviously, if there's any law reform, ongoing law reform, the Child Protection Code being reviewed, this is an opportunity to include it. It could even be the constitution of a country. So any opportunity, legal window opening, we can use it also to push and achieve prohibition of corporal punishment in one or all settings, ideally all settings, but it will depend. So that's it actually. Different factors depending on the countries. And so we have a guide for effective law reform. This is available. It's online, so you have it in English, Arabic, and French. This is we go through all these different aspects and how to achieve effective law reform, taking into account maybe different context, legal context as well. So that's it for best. We can stop there, and maybe we'll go to the next speaker, which should be Dr. Tush, I think.
Lovely. Yes. Handing over to Tush. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself, and then I will share your video, I think.
Yes, indeed. Can everyone see me? Because I can't seem to see myself. Hang on.
Yes.
We can see you clearly.
Okay, good. I can see myself too. Hi. Ayubowan from sunny Sri Lanka to everyone, and massive thanks to Bess and Sonia for giving Sri Lanka the opportunity to share our little success story. There's a long way to go, but hey, every step is worth celebrating. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Okay, so I'm the chairperson of Stop Child Cruelty Trust, and also we're talking about some of those strategies. The very first one was about building alliances. So we have also spearheaded the alliance of many other organizations, like-minded, on child rights and child protection on a variety of issues, calling ourselves now the Child Protection Alliance, which has given us a lot of credibility to work with the government and other organizations, both nationally and internationally. So in 2022, after 30 years of trying to end corporal punishment in Sri Lanka, we thought of we actually came to a realization. We always knew that it was kind of a triangular, well-balanced mechanism that is required with legal reforms, changes of attitudes, and having governments or public, the government's will, as it were. So political will. But sadly, in many of the Asian and Africana regions, that is possibly the weakest link. So we thought, okay, we need to address this, and we're going to show you a little video on how we addressed this. It was a very long campaign. We realized that doing ad hoc project style, sort of, sudden, soda bottle effect is not going to be effective in the long run. Because there had been so many projects like that being done over the years, and we realized that we needed to have a very sustained, long process and taking many of those strategies on board. So let's share this little video, and then maybe we can have a discussion afterwards. Over to you, Bess.
Okie dokie, just looking for this video. Where is it? See if this works. Is it here? Sorry, not that one. The inevitable tech challenges. Okay, right. I think we have it.
Thank you, Bess. There was a bit of a music there, but I think that's all right. Don't worry. Thank you so much for that. Basically, so let me expand on that. We started our campaign in February 2022 in February. What's the 14th of February? Sorry, I've gone into mental freeze.
Do you want me to share your slides?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, please. What's the day on February 14th?
Valentine's Day.
Yes, thank you. So on Valentine's Day, we started the campaign to talk about love. We didn't want to kind of hit it hard to say this is about ending violence, or about corporal punishment. So we started the campaign talking about love for our children on Valentine's Day. And then once that sunk in, about a month later, we launched No Goody, hashtag No Goody 16.2. So we tried to raise as much awareness as we possibly could. Goody in the Sri Lankan text means hitting. No Goody soon became a very popular catchphrase. So the no goody was a little bit slangy, and it started to attract more of the younger generation as well. So no goody 16.2, going on to the SDG goal 16.2. So everyone started asking, what is this 16.2? So we were able to then highlight the fact that Sri Lanka was the only pathfinding country in South Asia on ending violence against children. And we are now trying to focus in on ending corporal punishment. So that was in itself was a huge realization. Next slide, please. And as we moved on, we had several stages within our campaign. And one of the things that we kept sort of hitting our heads against, banging our heads against, was being called Western influencers trying to bring, different cultures to our country, and we were the spoilers, and we weren't being heard very well, and we weren't getting a very warm reception in certain circumstances. So we needed people other than ourselves. We needed to take a step back and put someone else in front of the camera. And for that, we established the very first UNICEF-style child protection ambassadors in Sri Lanka, all very famous people, singers, actors, and even a member of a clergy who is not in the sort of the very conventional type of clergy, but he was a very more holistic person, always talking about peace and violence, non-violence, and things like that. So it was a great mix that we had. And when they spoke through their platforms, the message was very loud indeed. So our objective was really to get political will, get the politicians to sit up and hear us and implement the things that were stagnating. So to ignite that, we started the campaign, and we launched in February 2022, as I said. But within about 2 years, I'll explain, which considering the 30 years of trying was a very short period in our diaries, to say that it actually went to as far as being approved. A bill is now been approved, and it's waiting for Parliament to be submitted to Parliament. The strategy overall was to have this social movement, to be able to put pressure. So we with the child protection ambassadors, we then started going around the country. Thankfully, Sri Lanka is a very small island. You can do from north to east in one day. And we touched across all geographical borders and ethnicities, going from the south to the north, to the west, to the east, on key cities. And during the time of COVID, between 2020 and 2022, there were 17 children who unfortunately were murdered in Sri Lanka through abuse, either physical or sexual. But nobody seemed to be able to highlight this, apart from some of the international media. So the parade that we took around these cities was very heart-tugging. In one of those pictures you would have seen, or you may not have noted even because it went so fast, in the video, we had little caskets on a open vehicle, and these caskets were as a reminder of the deaths, and it brought a huge conversation. So every time we went to the city, we had the big screens going, videos being shown, music being played, and we were giving out leaflets and talking to people. And with that, we also went into schools, we went into communities, and we talked about rights-centered communities for children and adults. So that became a huge a movement in itself, when people started to talk more and more, and they came to actually listen to us. And for each city, we had one of those key celebrities to back us up with, so that people could come. We would draw the people to say, so-and-so is coming, but then that so-and-so was only there for about 5 to 10 minutes. And the next hour to a half a day to 2 days, we ran the show after that. But it was very effective. The most effective elements of that was the child protection ambassadors and the alliance that we formed, giving us more credibility. But however, every time we try to approach the politicians, you hear the good old rhetoric, the same thing that we hear. We were in many parliamentary committees, many meetings, and in the end, it was back to square one. So we then decided there was a political change going through Sri Lanka, and we decided we need to take this onto a more international arena, so that human rights in itself was taking a big center stage in society, about the fact that human rights was important, although children's rights were never discussed. But on that, we piggybacked on the human rights concept, and we went across to Sri Lanka's assessment at the UPR sessions. And we were the only organization representing 5.2 million children of Sri Lanka. 25% of our population are children. We have a very young population. So we were able to rally the states. And for the first time, a record number of countries gave recommendations on corporal punishment and all sorts of other child rights that we were campaigning for, but mainly on violence. And we did a lot of lobbying afterwards, serious lobbying, to sort of get in touch with these foreign diplomatic missions within the country, and get them to be at certain meetings with the government, etc. And that actually made them sit up. That was a key thing that made them sit up. And then in the end, even after doing all of that, even after making the proposal for this, the bill on legal reforms on corporal punishment, it was then sent to the then president, and who was the cabinet minister for children's affairs. In March of 2024, we were in his office trying to convince him to take that matter up in time for 30th of April, which was International Day on Ending Corporal Punishment. And after an hour-long conversation, the only message that we got back from him was, sorry, things that takes priority. And we were rock bottom. We were rock bottom. We didn't know what else to do. And the other thing that we hadn't done and we never intended to do, I was just so frustrated. I just came home and took to Twitter. I only just put one message to Twitter to say how sad I was that the president didn't take us seriously and our children are not having a chance in hell, kind of thing. And it just went viral. It just went so viral that in the end, the whole bill and the process was passed within 30 days, and he actually approved it, and the bill is now ready to be sent to Parliament. So in short, it can be done. It just needs a little bit of a push and somebody who is a little bit bold enough to take the rap of whatever that comes back. It's not always a very positive way to criticize things, but if you do it in a gentle way, people do back you up. So just be bold, be brave, and be relentless in your campaigns. Thank you.
Brilliant conclusion there, Tush. Thank you so much. It's been so inspiring to watch the Sri Lankan campaign. And hopefully we'll have some questions and more comments from you later. Okay, so I think now we're going to share a video from, let's see. Yeah, now we're going to share
Australia, I think.
Australian presentation. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Hello, my name is Sophie Havighurst and I'm a professor at the University of Melbourne. I'm also a leader of the Tuning into Kids Parenting program, and along with my co-conveners, Professor Daryl Higgins and Karen Flanagan, we are leading a campaign of ending physical punishment of Australian children. This campaign has been going over the last 2 years, since April 2022, when we started to gather together many interested people who wanted to see change in our laws and change what was happening in Australia. So I'm going to tell you just briefly about some of the work we've been doing today and give you a bit of an example of what's been working so far. We have started with a great gathering of about 130 people who are now part of our group, and many of them are working in the different states or territories of Australia to make change. It's currently legal in all states and territories in Australia to use physical force to discipline a child by a parent or guardian. We know also that the rates of use of physical punishment are high currently and obviously and previously in over many decades in Australia. The Australian Child Maltreatment Study found that 6 in 10 young people reported being hit 4 or more times in their childhood, and 1 in 2 parents have reported using physical discipline with their children. Now, we are seeing a slight shift in this, in that the younger generations, there is less use of physical punishment. The older generations, it was much higher, but there's still a very high rate of use of physical punishment with young people. We also know that there is not currently a climate within the political space for change. We've been writing to premiers and to attorney generals responsible for the legal space in Australia, and we've had some very resounding no's to actually calling on legal change. Example being from the New South Wales Attorney General, restrictions to limited use of excessive force are currently sufficient in the law. We don't believe that's the case, and many of the advocacy groups in New South Wales also do not believe that either. In Victoria, where I'm from in Melbourne, the Attorney General has said our laws must achieve an appropriate balance between protecting children and safeguarding the family home from unnecessary intrusions by the state. Now, we believe that intrusions by the state are actually very important when it comes to protecting children from the harm of physical punishment. The goals of our campaign of EPAC are, first of all, to change the laws in each state or territory to prohibit any form of corporal punishment. We also want to increase the visibility of the impact of using physical punishment on children. A bit like what Wales have done or New Zealand have done, a really important public health campaign, so people are aware of the impact and know that there are alternatives. And the third thing we want to do is make sure that everybody has access to an alternative to using physical discipline in the form of evidence-based parenting programs. And that's an important part of what many of us are involved in Australia. So far, our group has been meeting quarterly and coming together online for Zoom meetings. So that's all coming from different places around the country. We are really working on an evidence-based campaign because many of us are in the research space and academic space. We're using an evidence argument in what we're doing. So as a result, we have had a special issue on corporal punishment in Australia and a number of different papers looking at the current state of evidence on physical punishment and the impact and what's needed for legal change. There's also been the important work of the Australian Child Maltreatment Study that we've used as a foundation for some of our campaign work. And many of us have had many different media news stories in the newspapers and print, online, TV, radio. So there's been a huge number of articles and pieces of media that have come out from our work over the last 2 years, which is really exciting. Now, we've also sent letters to Attorney Generals and Premiers, and this has led to some important shifts, at least in getting an idea of where the attitude is at, which is not always fantastic, but also telling us where the openings are possibly occurring. And we've been working in both states, but also in interest-based groups to try and look at what can we do within our different disciplines and within our states to actually bring about change. We worked on a position statement and starting to make sure that that can be endorsed by many of us. And a petition for legal change has also been part of some of our many wonderful activities we've been involved with. One example of something that's working relatively well is what's happening in the Australian Capital Territory, ACT. This is where the heart of Parliament, our federal Parliament, sits. And what we've been doing here over the last year is that we've been able to meet with the Attorney General's office, who actually gave us a relatively warm reception to the ideas, but said we would need to wait until the end of this year when there was an election, that the time was not right till after the election. If the Greens and potentially Greens Labor got back into Parliament, they'd be more likely to consider a review of the law then. So we've also heard through Jodie Griffith-Cook, who's one of our members, along with other members of EPAC in the ACT, they also have been advocating to the Attorney General Office, who is giving similar messages. An adult survivor of physical abuse has also been advocating and getting the same message just in the last month. So we know we're at a point where we're likely to be able to make some changes. So we know that if one of our states or territories shifts the law, it's likely to lead to shifts and changes in other states and territories. So we see this as important. We've also done wonderful things in terms of a lot of media campaign, and there's definitely an energy now for change. It's not quite no, these are the anti-smacking people. There is more of a sense of, well, maybe this is a better approach than using physical discipline. Maybe we're doing better for children if we use other ways of parenting. So we do feel like we're in a stage right now where there's a climate for change. And we've just got to keep our voices loud and stay strong and speaking with the right people at the right times. Hope this has been useful and wishing you all well in your campaign.
Another really, really energetic, impressive campaign from Australia. It's great that they have over 100 organisations and people involved in the campaign there, and that they are seeing a change in the climate, even if they're not quite ready for the law reform. I think we are going to share one more video, which is a message about the campaign in Jamaica. It's just a short message from the children's ombudsperson of Jamaica, and she's going to talk about what they've been doing there.
Jamaica, like many countries in the Caribbean and the rest of the world, has issues with the matter of corporal punishment. Corporal punishment in Jamaica has deep cultural roots that embed it as a part of the fiber of society. So the question is, how do we successfully broach any kind of awareness that corporal punishment is in fact violent and is something that we have to treat with in terms of an effective public health campaign to eradicate it as a part of all forms of violence against children being tackled in a wholesome and effective way. We've made some progress. For example, corporal punishment is not permitted in any institution and also in early childhood institutions, and it's not used as any kind of punitive measure in terms of juvenile correctional centers. But we still do have corporal punishment in the home, and we also have many persons who cling to this as their form of disciplining their child. In Jamaica, we have very, very positive discussion around the recognition that we need to treat this issue. We're talking about positive discipline and alternatives that are workable and effective in relation to corporal punishment. And there are discussions that are far and wide as to the legislative changes that need to take place in order to ensure that we are distancing ourselves from this practice, which we find harmful to children. As Children's Advocate of Jamaica, this is an issue that has not escaped my attention. And in fact, the Office of the Children's Advocate has long had very strident and rigorous social media campaigns and promotions that speak about what corporal punishment actually is and what are some workable and practical alternatives that parents and caregivers can use in terms of maneuvering and working through their relationships with the children over whom they have control. We commit to continue these public education campaigns, not only on social media, but through our school tours and community engagements that we participate in all over the country. The dialogue is rich, and we have a growing number of stakeholders and members of the public who are recognizing that corporal punishment is really a default position, because sometimes they don't have any tools that they think are effective. And so there is an awakening almost of the senses, and persons seem more open to have this discussion. We also have certain faith communities that are engaging in the dialogue and seeing it as a form of violence that we really need to tackle. So I think that Jamaica is not where it should be, but we certainly have an increased number of persons who are galvanizing towards looking at effective alternatives and really seeing how we can embrace and nurture and guide children through loving correction and just assisting them with navigating through their feelings in a more positive way. We are committed. Recently, the Office of the Children's Advocate also started its work to become an official no-hit zone, and we intend to conclude that by the end of this year so that we can make it very public as well in terms of anyone who visits our space that this is in fact our theory, it is our belief, and it is something that we are working towards. This is an excellent campaign that the End Violence Coalition continues to work on, and we're so happy to have been invited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Some really great insights there from Jamaica, I think, in terms of addressing different sections of the community, engaging faith and community leaders, ensuring people understand the alternatives to violent punishment, and then that very concrete approach of becoming a no-hit zone. That's a kind of very clear communication and kind of changing norms and behavior in a particular place. I think we are now going to hear from Kate in Canada. And Kate, if you're happy to introduce yourself a bit and share your slides, that would be great.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Kate Butler. I'm the past chair of the Canadian Coalition for the Rights of Children. Really happy to be here with all of you. I'm calling in from Toronto, which is on the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe. So we are also in a parliamentary system here in Canada. I have a quick map of Canada up there, just to show you that we have these 10 provinces, 3 territories, which are responsible for a lot of laws around education, welfare, childcare, but we also have one federal government, which is responsible and implements the criminal code. And this is really what we're dealing with in our campaign here in Canada. So it's section 43 of the criminal code, which says that every school teacher, parent, or person standing in the place of a parent is justified in using force by the way of correction, as long as it does not exceed reasonable circumstances. As you can see, that's a pretty vague sort of statement, and there's been a campaign for about 40 years to try to get rid of this section of the criminal code. This law itself dates from 1892, and it comes from English common law, so it's a colonial law that we still have in place in the 21st century. It was used in the last century as a successful defense for teachers in residential schools against Indigenous children, and of course it's been used against many, many children in Canada over the years. So what really picked up steam was about 25 years ago, a group of people were able to bring this before the Supreme Court of Canada, so our highest court in Canada. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that Section 43 does not violate children's rights under the Charter or the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this was very disappointing for us. They did recognize that Section 43 is very broad, so they tried to carve out sort of a zone of legal assault against a child that's okay. And so I would really say for the last 20 years, this is kind of the context in which we're working, which is that the Supreme Court has said this is okay, and so our advocacy has had to be really focused on how do we overturn this. So I'll move on kind of to what our campaign is about. And really what we're trying to do, as I said, is repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code. Our overall campaign strategy has been to advocate to parliamentarians to put forward bills to repeal Section 43. So we're on our 19th bill, which is honestly a little bit dispiriting, but I suppose it's also good that people are still committed to this. It hasn't been an issue necessarily to find parliamentarians willing to bring this bill forward. The challenge, of course, is getting it passed into law. So there's been an attempt to build a coalition of 700 professional organizations and civil society groups. I want to give a shout out to Ron Ensom, who is on this call today, who's been one of the real leaders in Canada, as well as Dr. Joan Durant. I've got to know both of them and their passion for this, and I've learned so much, and I think it speaks to their dedication that there's so many organizations and people still working towards this, and we are, as I will continue to say, we are hopeful, we are close to some change here. So what do we do? What's our strategy? Well, we call on others and the supporters to submit letters to MPs, to all the sort of government ministers whenever a bill is introduced. So what's been really effective in Canada? Well, I'd say a few things. So first, and I believe that our Australian colleagues just talked about some of this as well, but it's just informing MPs repeatedly about the harms of corporal punishment until they can no longer dismiss the research. Dr. Joan Durant has, she has a career's worth of wonderful evidence that we draw on when I speak about it. We talk a lot about the evidence about why this harms children. We also inform them repeatedly about the 67 countries that have abolished their criminal defense laws, so they can no longer suggest this is radical. For me, I come from sort of the international human rights world, and that is something that I really want to drive home, and it's so inspiring to be on this call with all of you, because just know that we are looking to the work that you're doing, and it's exciting to see those of you who have made so much progress. We talk about this all the time, about all these countries that have made change, and how can Canada as a Pathfinder country not live up to our expectations. And finally, as many of you know, the Indigenous people in Canada have experienced, racism, discrimination, many sort of effects of colonial legacy here in Canada over the years. And in 2015, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which issued 94 calls to action. The government, currently, the federal government has said they feel obliged to implement these calls to action. They have not implemented all 94, but they are, working on it, I suppose. And repealing Section 43 is one of those calls. So the Truth and Reconciliation call to action number 6 is to get rid of corporal punishment in Canada. So that's been a really effective tool for us too, because it shows that there is this broad coalition of people who want to get rid of corporal punishment in Canada. There's been a few obstacles in campaigning. The one I have here is the Ministry of Justice has not been particularly supportive, but I guess I would also say that we just haven't had an infrastructure that has emerged in some other countries. And again, even listening to all of you speak today, it's inspiring to hear what you've done, but it's also disheartening because in Canada we don't have that. We don't have that federal children's commissioner. We just haven't had that sort of group to sort of organize us. So it really has been a grassroots approach, and it's, I guess, in some ways amazing we've got this far. One piece of advice we'd give to other campaigners is to do the prep work behind the scenes so you're ready to go when the legislation is put forward. Again, we've had many years to work on this, 40 years in some ways, 25 years in the last, or 20 years, I guess, since the Supreme Court decision. We're very heavily reliant on the willingness of supporters to write when we ask them to write. And so this requires ongoing organization. We do try to use social media. We have a No Violence Against Children Facebook page. I can pop that in the chat, which keeps the issue alive. So we really try to work with our supporters and have them help us whenever that bill is actually before Parliament. This is the rationale for repeal of Section 43 of Canada's Criminal Code. I could also put this some link to it in the chat. At this point, anything could happen. We have 2 bills before Parliament right now, one before the House and one before the Senate. The bill that's before the House, it has gone through the second reading. It's gone through committee, which is really exciting, and we're just waiting for government to bring it back to the House for a third reading. The only problem is we are sort of at a time of political gridlock of sorts in Canada, so we're really not sure what will happen. But we'll keep you posted, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Kate. I think all the campaigners in Canada just exemplify the persistence and tenacity needed. 19 bills that have been presented to Parliament. So that's 19 years in a row, I think. It takes persistence and commitment, and you're clearly an incredibly well-organised campaign, and we continue to support you and wish you well. Just going to hand over to Sonia and to see if there's any comments or questions from everybody.
No unanswered questions, but we had colleagues from Belgium, from I think the organization Défense des Enfants, saying that they're also going to launch their own campaign in early November. And so they're going to launch their campaign, and there's an exchange. Actually, they're planning to go to Tunisia because Tunisia has already prohibited corporal punishment in all settings. So they're going there to see how they're campaigning. They're doing their own work, and then so obviously we'll try to implement in Belgium. So this is we can see that it's peer-to-peer learning, which is interesting as well. And then that's it. Some other questions about, I think it was about the law in Sri Lanka, the way the law is being enacted and how it comes into force and so on. So yes, no major question, but if you do have question, please ask them, and we take it from there. And I think was there someone who wanted to speak? Bess, I don't know, maybe Menaz?
Menaz,
Yeah.
please do come in. Please introduce yourself. It's lovely to see you and be great to hear your comments.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Mehnaz Aziz from Pakistan, Islamabad Capital Territory. And I'm a former parliamentarian. I introduced and presented the bill on prohibition of corporal punishment and worked hard on getting it passed. And it happened in 2 years. And we did get a lot of traction, though a campaign was not built around it. But, there was this parliamentary bipartisan lobbying, and then we got some singers, Shehzad Roy, who's very famous for working for children, and the and the international press, the local press, the judiciary, and as a private member, and I was in the opposition party. So the bill was passed, and I would like to comment here now. Then, for 1 year, the party that I belonged to was in power, and I was the parliamentary secretary for law and justice. And I utilized that time to get rules. So once the bill is passed, you need to get the rules passed. We follow the British system. I don't know about the other countries. So the rules were passed also, and they were launched. And what I had decided, because my background is in working with education and marginalized children, that, this act will be parked, the responsibility will be with the education ministry. So what happened? There is no implementation. I have written, I'm not a member of the parliament. I'm a very strong voice in the social sectors. And I have previously 25 years of working in the social sectors with my own NGO, Children Global Network. So what's happening now? So it's frustration, because it was not just one bill that I passed. There were 3 bills that I passed for children. So I think that, it's very interesting for me to join this meeting, because we didn't have a campaign to pass the bill. It was a lot of hard work and lobbying and all that. But now we need a campaign to implement it. And Tush and Australia, Sri Lanka, Jamaica, other countries, Canada, all of you, Sri Lankan experience is closer to us. Because I've been to Sri Lanka and all that. So I just feel, I'll just quickly come to the point now. And so it is, yes, there has to be political will, there has to be a budget, there has to be the passage of the bill and all that. Our bill was very interesting because it is not just about schools. It's about schools, madaris, care centers, orphanages, workplaces. So it covers everything. So it's a very complicated bill. And to have a prohibition in the Islamic, madaris is also very huge. But then total silence for the last 2 years. So what I would like through this meeting today, Bess and Sonia, very important meeting. I tell you, I am so excited and my energy is back, that this alliance, to create an alliance, and we all may be in different phases of what we are doing. So not just a national alliance, but an international alliance, a regional alliance to end corporal punishment. And I would very much like to do that, to push and to start the campaign for the implementation, because it's done in one province and it's not done in other province. We can do that too. But where it's done, to do that. And I would say that all of us should join our heads together and create a platform so we are able to implement, because by the end of the day, it's the implementation and the budgetary cooperation that is required. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Menaz. Very encouraging message. Thank you. I have a quick question before I hand over to Olivia. The question is for Dr. Tush. You can answer just in one word. The question is, they couldn't hear what went viral and served to speed passing the bill. Just
Sure.
1 or 2 words.
Okay, yes. Every time we went and met a politician, every time we met a public officer, we got the media involved, and especially on the social media. So we had a kind of a pathway of accountability. Otherwise, it was going to be just another meeting and another rhetoric and another just a promise. But in the end, when the final meeting came with the president, the executive of the country, the signature is his, and when that needed to be done after having the meeting in March of 2024. Asking him to pass the bill in time for the 30th of April's International Day on Corporal Punishment, he kind of refused. He said he had other things to do. And I did something which was very uncharacteristic and unplanned. And I went on Twitter to express my dissatisfaction, my despair, and it went viral. So
Okay.
with the international communities and other people realizing what was going on internally was kind of a shaming thing, I suppose, that although that was not what I intended to do. And then within a month, it was approved and it was passed.
So it was a message on social media. That's
Yes,
very efficient. Thank you.
And the thing is, people seem to be shy and afraid to actually speak up. And sometimes it works as well. So, do use your own platforms and be honest, because people do understand. People will come on your side.
Thank you, Dr. Tosh. So now we hand over to CBS's Olivia, then over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Olivia Lind Hallorsson. I am the head of the Children at Risk Unit in the Council of the Baltic Sea States, which is an intergovernmental organization joining 10 member states from our region and the European Union. And Children at Risk is one of our flagship priorities. And we are very excited to host this part of the event. I'd like to extend a warm thank you to Bess and Sonia for organizing. To all of the speakers, it's been really interesting to hear from you, and also, of course, all other colleagues who have joined us today. It really is so valuable to come together and share experiences. And that is something that we see in our region. I am going to attempt a share. Let's see how that works. Can you see my slides? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we are very proud in our region that all our 10 member states have a legal ban in place. And while some countries, such as Sweden, have more than 40 years of experience in implementing the ban, others have more recently embarked on this journey. And I think that the absolute most important lesson from our region is that change in attitudes and behavior is possible, and that is really key to implementing the law. But this does, of course, not just happen. It takes time and concerted efforts to build that consensus that corporal punishment is no longer acceptable, and also a change of behavior is possible, even if it has very strong roots in our societies. And we also see that it takes time and concerted efforts because tendencies and trends concerning corporal punishment, and more generally the perception of children as rights holders, are fluid. They change over time. So just because you achieve the ban once and you see positive impact and implementation, that does not mean that you can relax and just hope that it will continue that way. Societies, political leadership change, and we need to respond to that change. And that means that we need to have ongoing, long-term, comprehensive initiatives that involve a broad range of actors, including, of course, children, families, caregivers, schools over time. And I think it was Bess that mentioned also that we need to look very carefully at the environment in which we campaign. Ongoing monitoring evaluation is really crucial so that we can capitalize on opportunities or respond to emerging developments, understand what tools are most appropriate to campaign and communicate at a given time. And campaigning and awareness raising is one of many central activities in that comprehensive strategy to implement the ban. And when it comes to campaigning, in our region, we learned that non-judgmental campaigns and positive messages have the strongest impact, especially if we manage to establish a dialogue around the harm of violence, both to children, parents, and also educational facilities, but also the value of communication, sharing, warmth, and respect. We also saw that political support is not only important when advocating for a ban, it continues to be central to campaigning for implementation of the ban. Political leadership need to continue to show that this is an issue that is high on the political agenda. A given is, of course, involvement of children. A key learning from our region is that children still need to know more about what to do when they are exposed to corporal punishment. And children also tell us that they want to be supported in their role as peers. It's often friends or siblings that hear about or witness corporal punishment first. And it is, of course, an obvious again, but I think it's worth mentioning this time and time again, and that is that we need to know a lot about our audiences so that we can develop specific efforts to reach vulnerable, marginalized populations or those who are hard to reach. In the context of a project in our region, the Nonviolent Childhood Project, we developed a series of guiding documents, and one is particularly on campaigning. And I've put the website address there. I'll put it in the chat as well in case you are interested in those documents, which to a much more detailed extent explain some of the good practice and learnings from our region. But now I am delighted to hand over to Pal, who will speak about campaigning in Iceland, one of our members. And then we will move to another part of the world. We'll hear from Robert, who will speak about campaigns to eliminate corporal punishment in Kenyan schools. So Pal, would you like to take the floor and start by introducing yourself?
Yes, and yes. Hello, so I'm going to try to share my slides. I managed to do that before, we started, so I will try to do it again. So let's see. So do you see my slides now moving? Are they in?
We actually don't see your slides at all, or at least I don't.
That's typical.
I can't speak for others, but I don't see any slides.
Okay, that's typical.
Yes. I jinxed it. before when we were practicing. I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I will try again. Let's see. So do you see anything now? No?
I'm afraid not.
Let's share.
Oh, there we go. Something
There we
is
go.
happening.
Something is happening. Yes,
Yes,
bravo.
brilliant. Great.
And very soon you will see something, I hope. So, ta-da.
That's it. Thank
Yes.
you, Pal.
Okay. Okay, so hello all. I am going to talk about the campaigning to implement Icelandic law that prohibits all corporal punishment of children in Iceland. Now I will talk about the using of legal action and the campaigning for better implementation of the law once prohibition was achieved. And my name is Páll Ólafsson, and I am the Director of Department of Prosperity at the National Agency for Children and Families in Iceland. So, the Convention on the Rights of the Child was ratified in Iceland in November 1992, and the convention was legalized in our parliament, Alþingi, in February 2013. After the Iceland's ratification on the convention, efforts were made to better adapt the Child Protection Act and other laws to it, with special notice of Article 19 in the convention. And as you know, Article 19 addressed violence against children. It emphasizes that state parties must have proper laws in place to prohibit all forms of violence, both physical and mental. The revised Children's Act, which deals primarily with relations between parents and children, entered into force in November 2003. The revised Children Act emphasized parents' obligation to protect their children from violence. The new provision from 2003 reads as follows. The custody of a child includes the parents' obligation to protect their children from all kinds of violence and other disrespectful behavior. Those obligations were not clearly stated in the Children's Act before, but were now emphasized further with special notice of Article 19 in the CRC. In the comments with the new provision, it is clearly stated that this means that parents are not allowed to lay hands on their children. However, the Children's Act contains no special sanctions for violation of guardianship's duties. In other words, violations are not punishable in the Children's Act. So in April 2009, amendment changes were made to our Child Protection Act and were approved in the Parliament, Alþingi. Before the revision, the Child Protection Act stated that punishment and threats against children were only punishable if it was likely to harm the child mentally or physically. One of the biggest triggers for that change in Child Protection Act was a judgment passed in the Supreme Court on January 2009. The judgment dealt with the case of a man who was accused for violating the Criminal Code and the Child Protection Act for spanking two boys, but the man had been in relationship with the boy's mother. The man was acquitted, freed from this charge, and in the Supreme Court's decision, it was stated that the provision of the Child Protection Act does not absolutely prohibit a parent or other persons with their consent from using physical punishment on a child in response to bad behavior. The criminality of such behavior depends on if the act are likely to harm the child mentally or physically. So this judgment was responded to with changes to our Child Protection Act from 2002. The article now reads as follows. Any persons who subject a child to mental or physical punishment, threats or intimidation or exhibits other degrading conduct towards a child shall incur fines or up to 3 years imprisonment. The purpose of those changes was to remove any doubt that physical or mental punishment against children are under no circumstances permitted in Iceland. So we have a consensus in our society about not using physical or psychological violence against children. But we have to keep on talking about this and spreading the information. So the National Agency for Children and Families is responsible for gathering and publishing statistics about child protection reports. We do it each third month, and we send it to the media, and it always comes up some discussion in the society about those numbers. And we are also doing a lot of work introducing the Child Protection Act to professionals working with children. So we have a constant talking and giving information to those who are working with children. We teach about the Child Protection Act and the work of child protection services at the university level, in social work, to teachers, health service, police, and more people. And the agency also provides what we call a puppet theater that meets all second graders in Icelandic schools, where the puppets talk about violence and children and the rights of the children. It is called The Kids in the Neighborhood. And then we are in the third year of implementing a new act on the integration of service in the interest of children's prosperity. That is early intervention and early help and more structured help for children and families. So children should always have somebody in their surroundings they can talk to when problems or their worries arises. You can see the site of our integration of prosperity there on the slides. And many municipalities in Iceland are implementing to be child-friendly municipalities in cooperation with UNICEF, where they are doing a lot of work. I'm trying to see the. Just wait, see the script. Okay, we're doing a lot of work. Lot of work where I lost it. Help and most. Yes, many municipalities are implementing to be child-friendly municipalities in cooperation with UNICEF, implementing the CRC in their work, and Children Ombudsman in Iceland are also working with the Young People Advisory Board, and there is a lot of work between these municipalities and the Children's Ombudsman, how we are getting children or young people on board to talk about their matters, about violence, about abuse, about their rights in the society. So there is pretty good agreement that we are not using force against children, but we have to keep it alive, the discussion. And we are trying to implement children and young people in that discussion. So that was the message from Iceland.
Thank you so much, Pál. I think it really shows the point that we need to continue to do this, and not only kind of to change behavior and attitudes, but also to inform review of laws. There can always be improvements to law. And I think it's also really interesting to see how you use these activities to signal that this is still high on the political agenda. We are not letting go of this. We will continue to monitor and follow up. So thank you so much for that, Pál.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, may I hand over to you, and please start by introducing yourself.
Thank you so much, Olivia. My name is Robert Omwa. I'm an educationist in Kenya and also an advocate against the use of corporal punishment. If you allow me, I'll share my screen. Can you see that?
We can see
Yes.
that. It's not on slideshow, but we do see it.
What
Now it
about
is.
that?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert.
Amazing. Thank you so much to Bess and Sonia for organizing this. Just as I've said, I am part of a team of teachers in Kenya that is out to campaign against the use of corporal punishment. The dilemma in Kenya is that of a policy that is not being practiced or that is not being put into practice. In Kenya, corporal punishment was banned in the year 2001. That's close to 20 years. But the dilemma is that we still have this practice alive in classroom and this practice alive even in homes. And to my small personal story, I experienced corporal punishment in school. And when I became a teacher, interestingly, I got into the use of corporal punishment to manage my classroom. I didn't like it, but I had to teach the way I was taught. But at some point, I went on a journey to look for something different because I am and I was still a member of Beacon Teachers Africa, which is a group of teachers who look out for the rights of children. And these teachers were always being asked when they go out to defend the rights of children, they were being asked, what do you want us to use? Because basically the government just enacted the policy, but they never gave out tools to use. And that's how I came across positive discipline. And on your screen, you can see one of the trainings that we had. So basically, we are huge on training teachers and putting tools in the hands of teachers. And this is my unique preposition, the fact that I was in classroom, I experienced corporal punishment, I used it, and I know the effect it has on children. And now I am on a mission to ensure that classrooms are safe. So if you look at the Usichape Coffee positive discipline agents that we trained here with a funding of around $500, and we did it in Uganda and in Kenya, where we trained 20 teachers, who in turn went and trained 3 more teachers on positive discipline. And they went and affected close to 3,000 children who are in school. And today, those children are experiencing safe classrooms. So our campaign objective is to equip teachers and to give them positive discipline tools. We realize that the path of criminalization and criminalizing teachers who've used corporal punishment was not working, because this is an ingrained practice. It has become a norm in the society. And we decided that we're going to fill that gap that has been left by the government, one day at a time, one teacher at a time. And we saw a lot of opposition from parents, from teachers, where a teacher who was not privileging corporal punishment was seen as a weak teacher. And we embarked on modeling. So we decided that our positive discipline agents would not go out fighting those teachers who were advocating for corporal punishment, but they would leave it. And teachers started drawing near, and they were seeing those classrooms happier. And they said, what is this thing that you're doing? And we are having more teachers come on board. We do workshops, but that's still not sustainable because of funding issues. So we decided to adopt what we call a whole school approach. And as you can see on your screen, that is one of our members actually talking to community members in barazas and talking to parents about the need to put down the cane. Teachers also decided to go to music festivals that are normally organized yearly in Kenya, and they were going for sports events, and they would say, we have something to say, and they would be given a minute or two just to talk about positive discipline. And that has given us much success because, as you can see on your screen, we also used media. So we got airtime in different media stations, and we decided to speak to people in their mother tongue. They say that if you speak to a person in their mother tongue, you speak to their heart. But if you speak to them in English, you're speaking to their mind. So we decided to spread the messages using local language, but that was not enough. Because we realized that the teacher training in this country called Kenya is huge on pedagogy, but very little on giving the teachers tools. And earlier this year, personally, I transferred my services from teaching in high school, and currently I teach in a teachers training college, and we have started a project called Closing the Tap. And we want to move to over 50 teachers training colleges in this country and put the positive discipline tools in the hands of those teachers so that when they go out to handle children, then they won't teach how I taught. We have obstacles, just as other campaigners have said. There's resistance from teachers, not all teachers, some teachers, resistance from parents. We have cliches like spare the rod and spoil the child, which we have to also deal with. And the way that we have handled this is we are bringing religious leaders on board, and we are having our trainings even in churches. There's a huge challenge with funding, just as I had mentioned before. And I also realized that there is no data. So it's like we are fighting this monster that is invisible, because we don't really know what's happening in those schools. So I have learned a lot from this session, and I actually had Prof say that passing the legislation is not enough. We also have to keep on advocating for rules so that that legislation goes through. And lastly, I want to say to my fellow advocates that this is a matter of urgency, and we don't have the luxury of time. And I just want to say that we must keep at it, be brave in the face of opposition, and the future is bright. And let's put positive discipline in the hands of our teachers. And that is a picture of my kids that I worked with. And they did me that beautiful letter, just appreciating how the class was transformed by using positive discipline. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Robert. That is so inspiring. I think one of the things that we see all over is the kind of transformative power of education, and kind of just learning about what the alternatives are, that there are other ways of keeping classes calm and working, and kind of just busting that myth that nothing will work as well as corporal punishment. And also so interesting to hear about your innovative ideas and how you use so many different tools, how you reached out to so many different audiences, language, education. So thank you so much, Robert. I'm sure that inspired a lot of us. I am going to hand back to Bess and Sonia because we don't have so much time left. I could not see any questions in the chat. Please raise your hand if I missed something. And I will just end by echoing what Robert said. Just keep going. Keep going.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And everybody, I feel like it's been a very, very inspiring meeting. And really what I am taking away is people's commitment, that you need a lot of commitment and you need to keep going for a very long time. Can I just ask, is there any final, very, very brief comments from anybody? No, not seeing any comments. Yes, so I think the things I'm taking away are the inspiring commitment that so many people show in many different contexts, the importance of developing a strategy and approach that's relevant to your particular context, the critical importance of persistence. That's, I think, the theme that's come through everything, is that the kind of support for corporal punishment of children, the acceptance of it is very, very deeply ingrained. And it just takes a really long time to challenge that. We need to keep talking about the fact that we shouldn't be doing it. We can't be violent to children, and there are so many positive alternatives. But that when we do this, we really do make a difference, and that we can make a difference, and that we see declining corporal punishment, and as Robert's photograph showed, very happy children when we manage to change behavior and change norms. And then I think the other thing I heard was, yeah, the importance of ongoing clear communication, using the opportunities that come up, whether it's a bill or a festival or a political moment, kind of being ready to use that moment to communicate our message. And yes, it is possible to end corporal punishment of children. And we're seeing that around the world. Me and Sonia are in a lucky position. We get to kind of watch all of this across the world. And while it's still incredibly common, we see changing opinions and attitudes and behavior everywhere. You know, people everywhere are questioning, is it okay to be violent towards children? No, of course it isn't okay. So we are making a difference. Everything we do makes a difference, and it's just a long job. So thank you so much to everybody who has joined. Thank you so much to every speaker. It's been so interesting to hear the different contexts and examples. It sounds like maybe a regional or an international alliance of some kind is being set up, and that's really exciting. From the comments in the chat, it sounds like people would find it helpful to be in contact with each other and to be able to discuss these issues more. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Any final words from you, Sonia?
No, we have questions about the recording and the presentations, so they will be made available.
Yes, we will send the recording to everybody. We will upload it on our YouTube channel, and we will ask all the presenters for their presentations, and we'll send them out as well.
And then there will be another webinar. It's part of the series. It will be about children's participation in the campaigns to end corporal punishment. So you will be kept posted. We'll let you know.
Thank you so much, everybody. And if anyone ever wants to write a blog about their experiences campaigning, we'd love to have that on our website as well. Okay, thank you, and have a great
Thank you.
Thank you,
Olivia.
Thanks, Bess and Sonia. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.